I definitely did not toss and turn on my bed over and over again last night. And at some point, my wife leaned over to me in the last 2 days and said, "What's the big deal? You do this all the time. You speak all over the place." I'm like, "Yeah, but I talk about clinical stuff. It's easy to hide behind the asthma talk or the dissection talk. This is a lot more difficult." So, wow, thank you to all of you guys for being here. Thank you to everybody who's spoken before me, and hopefully I can say something that is important. My trip here, my journey to come to FIX 2018 really started last year at FIX. I was really inspired by the stories that people told, the vulnerability that people showed on stage, and the thing that I left that conference with was the idea of being a champion for change. I think it's really easy to sit here and listen and look around the room and see these amazing women who are changing the conversation on a national and an international level. And for the rest of us to think, what do I do? What's my job here? I can amplify their messages, and I'm happy to do that. But is there something that I can do more locally? And for me, that locally is as local as my home. And talking about this and thinking about it is where Dara really put the idea in my head to talk about my story of leaving academics or moving out of the traditional academic pathway, saying no at work to say yes at home. But it's really not about stepping out of academics or saying no. It's about priorities. It's about how we decide what our priorities are. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me start with a story. So this story started about when I was 18. I was a freshman in college. I met another freshman in college. Her name's Beth. She would turn out to be my wife, and we fell madly in love with each other immediately. Or it took 2 years for me to get the courage to ask her out and 2 years for her to actually say yes. It was one of those two things. But eventually, we did fall in love, and what we found was that we had so much in common. We wanted very similar things. We had clear lives planned out for ourselves, careers that we wanted to pursue. She wanted to get her PhD and be a psychologist, and I wanted to go to medical school and be a doctor. And so we set down that pathway, and that path was so straight and narrow and simple and easy. That's all we had to do. I got into med school eventually. I got into residency, and about 2 years into my residency, I finally realized what it was that I actually wanted to do. I wanted to be like my mentor. I wanted to be the academic triple threat, the researcher, the clinical educator, the fantastic clinician. That's what I wanted. I wanted to be a program director. I wanted to be a full professor of emergency medicine. I wanted to have an academic career at one institution for the rest of my life. It's not too much to ask for. About the same time, my wife realized what she wanted to do. She wanted to do child psychology. Thank God there's a child psychologist in my house. And she wanted a private practice. She wanted to do some inner city work as well. And so we set down those pathways. And we were there for each other to support each other through that path, through her doing her dissertation, through me working 6 overnights in a row. We were there for each other. And this path was going so well. But we know that paths are not straight, they're not narrow, they're not this easy, because obstacles and difficulties arise. And our first obstacle or difficulty was this guy. This is my son, Matt. He's 10 now. Still has the same face. And I know it's not politically correct to call your kids difficulties or challenges or obstacles, but they are all of those things. And anyone whose kids aren't that, fuck you. I love them, I swear to God, I really do. But this changed everything. Kids change everything in your life. All of a sudden, I was no longer the priority. Not even in my own head was I the priority. And so we had to change how our lives were going to be. My wife took 3 months off. I took the maximum allotted time for a resident, which was, that's right, 0 days. But I got a month of, administrative work. And then when that was done, we went right back to work. We went right back to those careers that we were shaping. It meant a lot of stringing childcare together, about us not being in the same place at the same time to make this work, but we did make it work, and we pushed forward with those careers. And at that time, I was starting some research projects, I won a teaching award, I was out lecturing, all of the things that I saw my career moving into, I was doing it. And just as everything had gotten back on track, obstacle number 2 came. This is my daughter, Maya. She's 7 now. She doesn't look like this. And as much as 1 kid changes everything, 2 is like, it's like a punch to the face. Because it makes you think, wow, one was really great, why? Why? But we did it anyway. And this set us back again. This was much harder this time because, you're playing man defense, right? There's no 2-on-1 anymore. There's no tag teaming out. It was nonstop all the time. But after my wife took her 3 months off, and I took the maximum allotted time for attending, that's right, 0 days, we were right back in it. We were right back pushing forward with the careers that we wanted. But again, it was harder this time. And somewhere along this line, as we were struggling, this image came across my Twitter feed. I think somebody used this image yesterday. And I looked at this and said, yes, this is exactly what I'm going through. It looked like it was A to B, straight line, no problem, but it is this winding, twisting path. As those obstacles come, they make us veer. But all I have to do is work hard. All I have to do is double my efforts. I'm going to double down, and I can correct that line. I can get right back on track. And so that's what I did. Just put a little more time in, put a little more effort in. It'll be fine. I can do everything. I can be home with the kids. I can be at work. It's going to be fine. So over the next year or so, I did exactly that. I had the research projects going forward. I was traveling every 3 weeks or so for a conference, for a lecture somewhere. And of course, through all of that, my wife was at home taking care of the kids and building her practice. And all of this seemed to be coming together very nicely. That puzzle seemed to be starting to get solved until I realized that I had completely failed. Because while my career was moving forward, while the things that I wanted were changing, they were going the direction I wanted, I left my partner behind. I wasn't there supporting her. I figured I doubled down my effort, she'll probably do the same thing and it'll all be fine. But that's not what happened. She was left behind. And at some point, I finally realized it, and I realized that she wasn't happy. She wasn't happy with the career that she was in, and she wanted to change. She wanted to move to a different practice. I said, that's fine, that's great, do it. Make the move, knowing that that was going to be more time for her, less time for us together, more time for me at home. But I said, I can do it. I doubled the effort before, I can triple it now, no problem. And all of that started to come to a head because I realized that I wasn't doing the things that I said I was going to be doing. I wasn't really there to support her the way she wanted. I just said that I would do it, but that wasn't enough. And when it really came to a head, when it really kind of popped up in my face, was around 2013 or so. My wife had already gone to work, dropped the kids off at daycare at school. I was working a late shift, had a couple of meetings I had to go to before, when I got a phone call from daycare and from school saying, your kids are sick, you got to bring them home. Nothing major, they just had a cold, but they couldn't stay there. So I picked them up, I brought them home, and now I'm trying to figure out, how do I get to these meetings? These are mandatory meetings I have to be at. I got a shift to work. So I called my wife, trying to figure this out, and she said, don't worry about it, I'll cancel my patients, I'll come home. That's not the point. That's exactly the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. I have sick call. I'll call in sick call, you stay at work, I'll handle the kids, no problem. And it wasn't a problem. Everything was fine, everyone was happy, until I got back to work and realized that nobody was happy there, because those were meetings I was supposed to be at. And so every one of the leadership in my department who I was supposed to be meeting with came up to me and said, oh, are you okay? I heard you were sick. And I was like, no, I was fine. I was home with my kids. Couldn't your wife do that? How come your wife didn't stay home with the kids? And that sucked. And I was pissed. I was angry. Because here I was trying to be an actual father, trying to be an equal-ish parent at home, and do this, and kind of being shat on for doing it. And then on top of that, these people that I looked to, that were my mentors, the chauvinistic, misogynistic attitudes of can't your wife just do it, crushed me. And I stewed in that for a long time until I realized it wasn't their fault. It was my fault. Because nowhere along any of this career trajectory had I ever expressed to the people that I work with that I'm also a father, that I have kids at home, that my wife has a career, that I have other responsibilities. How would they know? I never missed a shift, I never missed a meeting. I was doing all of the things that they asked me to do, all the things that I asked them to give me in my career. I was there for. How would they know that this was a priority? I had never made it a priority to everybody else. And this illustration is just so wrong. That's the problem. So I went back, I met with my leadership, I discussed this with them, and I said, I have other things in my life that are important for me. I need to be at home more. I need to support my wife more. It means that I'm going to miss meetings. In fact, I can tell you right now that there's a bunch of meetings I just won't ever get to. And they told me, okay, you probably can't stay on this academic track anymore, or you're not going to be able to do those things. I think it was almost like a threat. And I looked back at them and said, okay, that's not my life anymore. And this was hard. I think it was hard for them because they hadn't had a situation of taking somebody and grooming them and pushing them through this for that person to then say, I'm all set. And it was hard for me because I was an overachiever. I had set out this pathway in front of me, and now I had failed because I had stepped out of it. The problem, though, and the problem with this illustration is that it's not a failure. The problem with this illustration is that the end point, the goals, what we measure as success, the finish line moves. It changes. And as that finish line moves and changes, we need to change with it. And I hadn't done that. In my head, my priorities had changed, but I hadn't actually changed them. What I needed to do was sit down and reanalyze those priorities. What was actually important to me? What did I actually want? And what did my family want? What did my family need? What did my wife need? I hadn't ever asked those questions. I mean, I did. I asked those when we were single, dating, and didn't have kids, and we had laid out a career in front of us. But I had never then taken more time after that to say my priorities have shifted, and I have to change with them. So that's what we did. We sat down, we tried to figure this out and said, how can I still have an academic career, but also be at home and not miss out on that stuff, and also support you growing this practice? And we came up with what that list looked like, what that career was going to look like. And then nothing changed at all. It didn't change. I mean, that's the honest truth. Nothing changed. Because what I didn't do was take any action to make it happen. If we want to actually do these things, if those priorities are real, we have to take action to make them happen. And I hadn't done that. I had just paid it lip service. I had just said, I have new priorities. But nothing had changed. We have to take the actions to make those changes happen. So this is the lesson, this is the challenge that I put for all of us. Set your own priorities. Don't let others set them for you. Don't do what's expected. Don't do what you're supposed to do. Do what you want to do. Do what you want to do. Figure out with your family, with your support system, what's going to actually work, what's actually feasible and tenable. We can't do everything. We can't be in two places at once. And we have a lot of angst about not being able to be everywhere. I seriously thought about calling Darren and saying, I'm sick, I'm not going to make it, because I wanted to bring my kids to school today. Because they asked me. We have a lot of angst about having to say no to things. But if we set our own priorities, then we can at least have some control of that conversation in our own lives. That's what we have to do. And this morning, as I was coming in, it was no joke that I tried to rewrite this entire talk in the last 6 hours. I realized that there was something else here, to bring it back to that champion for change. Because as I've been going through this over the last 5 years, I have had lots of mentors help guide me through this. And every single one of them has been a woman. Many of them are in this room. Thank you. Thank you. Whether they know it or not, they've been there for me as I've tried to figure this out. My wife has been there for me while I tried to figure this out. But I haven't had any male role models. I haven't had anyone in male leadership support this. That's what we need. I'm going to say something that nobody else on this stage has said or will say. We need more men. We need more men to say this is okay. Because if enough of us do it, then we can normalize this. It's normal to be an academic and be at home with your kids. That's okay. We can do that. But we need to do that. And so I hope I can provide the same mentorship for a female resident or a female attending. But if there's anyone out there who needs that, who needs to figure out how to make this happen, you can call me. You can email me. I'll try to help. I'll tell you that I haven't figured it out. My wife can probably help you more than I can. I said she's a child psychologist, perfect for emergency physician. But if we can do this, if we can set our priorities for ourselves and take action to make those priorities happen, then we have better control. We can be happier, and when more obstacles come up, and they will, my third obstacle is that little guy, Luke. Okay, that was the unexpected obstacle that came up. They will continue to come up, but we can continue to flex and bend, and this guy changed everything again. And for me, for my academic life, it meant Not just stepping out of the traditional academic pathway, but leaving the institution and finding a new pathway, finding a new way that I could get what I wanted, and understanding that I had to take control of that I had to take control of that with my family and set my own priorities. And I hope that all of you can do that too. Thank you very much.